somebody comes up with a system to describe what we see. But after a while, anomalies begin to appear, deviations, which the system no longer explains. And then eventually, so many anomalies, so many deviations exist in the system that people lose confidence in the system. And somebody comes along and suggests a new system to replace the old system that accounts for the anomalies, and then the cycle starts over again. Starts out, everybody loves this system. But then, over time, more anomalies, more deviations appear, and then somebody comes up and suggests a new system. And so this is what's happening in men's lives. We start out with a system like a secular system, and then these anomalies appear, and these deviations say, well, this system no longer works. This is what makes us restless. The anomalies. We have a belief system, but it just doesn't work. Things don't add up. It doesn't make sense. We become restless, and so we start looking for a new system. Good morning, men. Good morning. And welcome to Man Alive. And we have some visitors in the house this morning, so welcome to you too. Yeah. And hey, let's do our traditional welcome to our visitors. We usually do it at the end. Let's do it at the beginning. One hand clap on the count of three. Visitors welcome. 1, 2, 3. Glad you're here. And then for those of you joining us online, we also want to give you a warm welcome as well. And so on 3, 1, 2, 3, hoorah! Awesome. Welcome. Glad everybody's with us and joined in and in sync. Stephen Hawking, one of the most famous cosmologists of the 20th and 21st century, went to a small Baptist church with his sister when he was a little boy. Then he became a cosmologist, studied at Cambridge. He, in his early 20s, developed ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. So that, in addition to his contributions to cosmology, which I know nothing about, but I do know that he helped us understand more about black holes and radiation emitting from black holes, and somehow helped cosmologists towards unifying relativity and quantum mechanics, and that's still an unanswered question. By the way, it's really simple. Two things can be true at the same time. You know, you don't have to have a single theory of everything, right? Perhaps. Like I said, I'm not a cosmologist. So Hawking wrote a book called A Brief History of Time. I've been rereading it. 25 million copies of this book in print, so not quite the Bible, but a lot better than me. And so, and he famously ended his book, he probably somewhere between an agnostic and an atheist, given whichever day the question was asked. But he wrote on the last page of his book, why does the universe go to all the bother of existing? Does it need a creator? And if so, does he have any other effect on the universe? Up to now, most scientists have been too occupied with the development of new theories that describe what the universe is to ask the question, why? And then the last sentence is, if we do discover a complete theory, that was his mission, his project, a theory of everything. If we do discover a complete theory, it should in time be understandable in broad principle by everyone, not just a few scientists. Then we shall all, philosophers, scientists, and just ordinary people, be able to take part in the discussion of the question of why it is that we and the universe exist? Well, I think he's a little late because there is a unifying theory of everything, of why the universe exists and why we exist. It's called Christianity, but I get ahead of myself here a little bit. He writes his last sentence, if we find the answer to that, why it is that we and the universe exist, if we find the answer to that, it would be the ultimate triumph of human reason, for then we would know the mind of God. So a lot of people prayed for Stephen Hawking. He died he was given 2 years to live in his early 20s. He lived to be 76, so he lived another 50 years. Lou Gehrig's disease affects the mind, the body, the speech. Some of you who know of him would know that he had a device that allowed him to speak with his hand through a computer. So he lost his voice. But it doesn't affect the mind. I just think it's delightful that God kept that beautiful mind intact for another 50 years to help us further our understanding of how science and theology work together to explain why the universe exists and why we exist. So we are a Bible study. And our mission as a Bible study is discipleship, knowing God, knowing more about God, knowing how to have a deeper walk with God. We are a discipleship Bible study. We are going and making disciples. The book that I've written, What If Christianity Is True, which is the book that we're going through, is not a Bible study. It's a book of apologetics. And so our mission in the Bible study series is not to go through the apologetics of the book, but rather to talk about the Bible study, the discipleship part of the topics that are in there, and then integrate them. And so we talked about, in the first week, who do you know that is ready to discover or rediscover Jesus? And we talked about how Jesus is the truth, and we looked at scriptures, and then we talked about the heart of God is compassion, and how we look at people who might even be angry at us or disbelieving or even scoffers or whatever they are, to have that same heart of Jesus toward them. And then we talked about how the reason we do this at all is because Jesus said that the harvest is what? Plentiful. The harvest is plentiful. And so then last week, we did a brief flyover on belief systems and what do you believe, and we looked at the life of Solomon. And his project was to examine everything under the sun to find out what is it that's good for a man to do during the few days of life that he has under the sun. And we know that he came to the conclusion after looking at every possible avenue of pursuing meaning and purpose. He came to the conclusion that apart from God, life has no meaning. So it's interesting, there's a linkage between Solomon's quest, he was scientific mind as well, and Hawking's quest, and all the people that are searching, they're not searching for different things. We're all searching for the same thing. We're searching for something that is true. We're searching for the truth. Today, we are going to continue along in our series and look at secular, moral, and religious belief systems. This is chapter 3 in the book. And so we'll just start with the secular belief system. I remember it was my first year in business. I joined Toastmasters, worked my way through the chairs and that. But that first year, I remember I went to the annual banquet, and Charlie was one of the speakers. And Charlie was one of my heroes because he owned and operated a hugely successful insurance agency, very successful. And so he was speaking, and as he was trying to get the words out of what he wanted to say, finally he just said in frustration, he said, well, I'm going to get mine, you better get yours. And I thought to myself, even at that point, there sums up the secular point of view. I'm going to get mine, you better get yours. So it's not unusual that people would start with a secular belief system. And by the way, what I want you to do is I want you to understand better the differences between these world views, these belief systems, and then how people progress through them so that you can understand them, so that you, when you are engaging with people or even thinking about your own walk and how you maybe have regressed and where you want to go from there, but mostly talking with other people, you will have a better confidence, a better understanding of these belief systems, okay? So the secular system, it's the default system. It's everyone's default. It's where we start. We start with a secular worldview or a secular belief system, and the principal things that we're pursuing at the beginning in our first worldview, our first belief system: identity, meaning, purpose. Who are we? What are our lives all about? The secular value, kind of the core value of the secular system, and by the way, we could say so much more about each of these, but I just want to give you enough of a snack on each one so that you can draw some further differentiation in your own mind. But pleasure or happiness would be the chief value. You know, young people come on the scene. I want to be happy. I want to have fun. And so we started the series talking about the problem, why am I still so restless? And so the restless goal, or the goal of the secular person in their restlessness, the restlessness is driving them to find identity, meaning, and purpose. That's the goal. And so it's worth noting that these belief systems, this is a sidebar, these belief systems, they're not the choices, they're not the differences between good and evil. They're not goods and then evil belief systems. That's not the issue here, good and evil, because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So there's enough sin in all of them, including the Christian belief system. The flesh is willing, but the spirit's weak. There's sin in all of them, so it's not a question between good and evil. What should be understood here is that all people, and I say all people, whatever percentage of people are truly evil. Okay, there are people that are just truly evil. But almost all people want the same things. They want to know who they are. They want to know what their lives are about. They want to find love. They want to be understood. They want to be seen. They want to be known. They want to have a person they can give their life to. They want to have children. They want to raise a family. They want to do meaningful work. They want to have civic pride. They want to make a contribution. They want to leave the world a better place. And the difference is not good or evil. The difference is the belief system that they are employing to achieve those ends. Does that make sense? Yes. So the method of the secular person, you've heard me call this before the 4 B's. So the method of achieving the goal for the secular person is beauty, brains, bucks, and brawn. So beauty, it could be the majesty of creation, but it's physical beauty, looking good, appearances, chasing beauty, opposite sex beauty, brains, the pursuits of people like Hawking, the intellectual pursuits, bucks, or the buck, chasing the buck, money, And then brawn, a lot of people get into adventure. I'm into adventure. People get into what their bodies can do, performance and so forth. Our daughter-in-law did 29,029 last year. Made it halfway. It's like climbing Mount Everest up and down Whistler. And there are different places around the country, but up and down, you walk up and you take the ski lift down, and you climb Mount Everest in 36 hours. You have to do it in 36 hours. Well, she trained and trained and trained. I mean, she's like an ultra athlete, our daughter-in-law. And so some people put emphasis on that. So I want us to take a look, because we are a Bible study, at the life of Solomon. We started him last week, and I mentioned he had 1,000 wives. So let's take a look at Solomon's secular pursuits. 1 Kings 11, 1-6. King Solomon, however, remember, he said, now all has been heard, and here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And so he was a man who was walking with God. Some of you have been through what King Solomon has been through. You've been walking with God, and then something happened, and here's what happened to him. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women. So it was the beauty. It was the beauty that got him. So Solomon basically was a pornographer. Right? He got caught up in pornography. He also got caught up in sexual immorality. He loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, one of his wives, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites. Now, it should be understood that in that era, marrying foreign women was a major way of forming political alliances. So it was providing protection for your people and expansion of your territory. So there's more to it than romance going on here. These women were from nations about which the Lord had told the Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after other gods. And so if you've gotten involved in pornography as a Christian, you find you perhaps have found your heart turning after other things. And so even though God had said that, nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. In other words, you have gotten yourself on something that may not be this, but there's been something that you've gotten your mind fixated on, and you just wouldn't give it up. I remember a man sitting at this table, but in a former location, table that was located in your location, so it's not these guys here. But one of the guys was sitting right there, and his problem was he loved 2 women. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was he wasn't willing to give either one of them up. Nevertheless, he just held fast to them in love. Solomon had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. So this secular way of thinking led him astray. And I was sort of using hyperbole last year when I said, is there anybody here who hasn't, committed mental adultery with 1,000 women? Well, that's only one a week for 20 years, so it's not that it's not that hard to get there. Just do the math. So don't think so poorly of Solomon. Do you think Solomon's going to be in heaven? Well, if he's not going to be in heaven, you're not going to be there either. Trust me, because the scriptures tell us that God said that he would never withdraw his love from Solomon. Every sinner goes to heaven if they are in faith. As Solomon grew, it's probably a little bit more than I probably should explain that a little bit more, but that's not the purpose of the day. As Solomon grew old, okay, so he'd been walking with the Lord, but when he grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord of God as the heart of David, his father, had been. And so he kind of became a little lukewarm at the end. He still loved God, but he also, was holding on to this secular view. And so what happens is that when we have a belief system and things don't add up, they're called anomalies of the belief system. So Thomas Kuhn wrote a book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, I think it is. And so he talks about how the major cosmological paradigms over the years, I can't pronounce his name, but Ptomely. Ptolemy, yeah. Anyway, so he said that the earth is the center of the universe. And that affected theology and philosophy and science. And then along came the Copernican revolution and the sun. Now we're heliocentric. And that changed everything, radically changed. And then Einstein came along and talked about, curved space and gravity. And well, Newton came along and then Einstein with gravity. And then Newton came along with curved space. And so each of these are huge changes in scientific paradigm. So how do these changes come about? Well, somebody comes up with a system to describe what we see. But after a while, anomalies begin to appear, deviations, which the system no longer explains. And then eventually, so many anomalies, so many deviations exist in the system that people lose confidence in the system. And somebody comes along and suggests a new system to replace the old system that accounts for the anomalies, and then the cycle starts over again. Starts out, everybody loves this system. But then, over time, more anomalies, more deviations appear, and then somebody comes up and suggests a new system. And so this is what's happening in men's lives, in your lives, in everybody we know's life, is that we start out with a system like a secular system, and then these anomalies appear, and these deviations say, well, this system no longer works. And so when this is what makes us restless, the anomalies. We have a belief system, but it just doesn't work. Things don't add up. It doesn't make sense. We become restless, and so we start looking for a new system. The secular problem then is this. It's that happy, healthy, and wealthy just doesn't satisfy. Happy, healthy, for a while, yeah, but then the anomalies appear, and it becomes Hebel. We talked about this word if you were here last week. If you're not, that's okay. Vapor. It's Solomon's word, meaningless. Vapor. Hebel. It's a vapor, and you find yourself still restless. And this is my actual sentence when I personally, when the anomalies of my secular system, and my philosophy was money will solve my problems and success will make me happy. But I came to a point where after having achieved some things, I said, there must be more to life. There's got to be. And people say that in their own words. You said this. You said there's just got to be more in your own words. The anomalies they just don't add up. There are just too many of them. And so here's the big idea for the day. It's all about the anomalies. It's all about the anomalies. Be ready when they're ready. So you've had a conversation with someone about Jesus, and they were not open to hearing it. They weren't ready. Why were they not ready? It's just because they didn't have enough anomalies adding up yet. In other words, their system was still working, even if it was on life support, it was still working well enough that they didn't feel the need to progress. Are we tracking here? All right. So then next comes the moral system. So people graduate, and I spent more time on the secular. I'll spend a little less time on the others. But in the moral system, belief system, the principal value is more or less to do the right thing. And the restless goal, in other words, the goal that made us restless, that led us into this, the goal is that something along the lines, I want to leave the world a better place. And so people enter public service, they enter volunteerism, they try to be a better citizen of the world. And the method, there's many different methods of that, but Aldous Huxley, the famous Brave New World, famous for not believing, and he commented, scientist, philosopher, all these things that he did. At the end of his life, he said, it's a little embarrassing for me at the end of my life that the only advice I can offer is try to be a little kinder. So this is the method of the moral person who wants to leave the world a better place. And then the moral problem is this: morality is an exhausting experience because none of us can live up to our own code of ethics, much less the ethics or expectations of others. We can't even live up to our own codes. And so what happens is that the anomalies, we're not moral because we have a sin nature. And so this catches up with us. At some point, it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't add up anymore. And so the person becomes then ready to move on to progress to a new system. And so most people, and it's not everybody. So what we want to do is we want to understand that when we're trying to help people understand if Christianity is true and come to their own conclusion about it, that it's all about the anomalies. We're looking for people for whom the anomalies have now become a burden too big. They walk with a tilt. They're walking with a tilt. They can't walk straight anymore because there are too many anomalies, and be ready when they're ready. And then finally, religious belief systems. So many people, when they have been through the secular, that didn't work. They've been through the moral, that didn't work. They end up, and we'll talk more about this next week when we talk about just the Christian system. But the presupposition here is that everyone believes something about God. Everyone believes something about God. Even those who don't believe in God believe something about God. So it's not surprising that people would want to look for some sort of transcendent understanding of why the universe exists, why we exist. And so they enter into a religious system, and the principal value of religious systems, apart from Christianity, and Christianity too, but it's alignment with God. That's the value. I want to become aligned with God. And so there are many different ways to get there, but the restless goal, so I've been moral, that's not working out. There are too many anomalies, too many deviations. That's not working out for me at all. So I'm going to become religious, and the way I'm going to become religious is through behavior modification. I'm going to change the way I live. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself or have us get too far ahead of ourselves, but we all know that behavior modification is doomed. It's doomed unless there is power for the behavior, behind the behavior, a power that we know as those of us who are Christians comes from the Holy Spirit, whom we also receive when we receive Jesus. So Christianity, again, ahead of myself, Christianity is not behavior modification. Christianity is heart transformation. And then when the heart is transformed, the behavior follows. It's not, some of you have been through behavior modification treatment programs, and you know that if the heart doesn't change, the behavior doesn't change. You have to change the heart. Now, some behavior modification is good. I'm not trashing that. I'm I mean, there are all kinds of things going on that are good for like OCD and things like that. But ultimately, for belief systems, if the heart doesn't change, then the behavior will not change. Okay? And then what is the method of the religious belief system? Well, it's good deeds to please God. I'm going to do good deeds. I was trying to leave the world a better place. Now I'm trying to leave the world a better place for God. I'm trying to please God and make him happy. And if I'm able to make him happy, if I'm able to perform, then I will be good enough. But then the anomalies start again because we can't keep it up. We can't do it. That's next week. Matthew 26:41. Why can't we do it? We can't do it because the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And so here is the religious problem. The flesh is deceitful, the flesh is wicked, and the flesh is weak. But the flesh is most wicked, most deceitful, and most weak when it's disguised as piety. When you become a Pharisee, when you become judgmental, when you know everything that's good for everybody else, but you can't see what's good for yourself because of your pride. And it's kind of a double problem too, because we can't say everything every time, but there's also the second part of this, okay, so I see the anomalies, my flesh, I'm acting righteous, but I know I'm not. I have the perfect advice for you, but I can't even accept it for myself. So that's one part of it. And then the other part, one of many other parts, is, I just don't feel like I can never do enough. I can't, no matter how much I do, I still have this feeling that I'm missing something. So these are anomalies that are appearing. So, brothers, let us be ready. Questions that you can ask. And these are going to be your discussion questions this morning. And what I'm going to actually ask you to do, I'll just read it if you don't mind. These are questions you can ask people you care about. For today, use your time today to role play and practice with each other on these exact questions. So if you will actually do this today, then it'll help you feel a little bit more comfortable doing it out there at Starbucks or at the gym. So ask each other, Ray, how would you describe your belief system? How would you describe, we're having a cup of coffee. How would you describe your belief system? What is it? What is it? Well, you're gonna answer, that person's gonna answer all over the board. But now you're gonna be able to, through this taxonomy that I've given you, you're gonna be able to say, well, that's basically a secular belief system, or basically a moral belief system, or a religious one, or maybe a Christian one, if they are. And then secondly, where are things not adding up for you? What's not working as you had hoped? Now, what are we asking at that point? We're trying to figure out, okay, what are the anomalies, the deviations that they see where their system's not adding up? And where we can spot those in someone's life, this gives us an incredible advantage. If you talk about negotiating leverage and advantage here, wow, you're so way up when you know the answer that they don't know themselves. So we're not trying to trick people into becoming Christians. We're trying to help them complete the journey that God has started for them. And our heart is compassion. But part of compassion is having knowledge that can be helpful to them. And this is knowledge that can be helpful to them. So, and then the third question, are you at a point you're interested in learning more about Jesus? That question is not appropriate at every conversation because you may have decided that the person is not ready. But if the anomalies are there, the big idea today, it's all about the anomalies. Be ready when they are ready. And I hope this helps equip you to be just a little bit more ready. Let's pray. Our dearest Father in heaven, thank you so much for telling us why the universe exists and and why we are here. And we just pray that everybody in our worlds, our spheres, would be able to find the truth that will set them free. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.